A lot of you listening might be slower than you could be, and you could be a lot more faster recording your tracks if you knew about a couple of really handy tricks. And this episode is sort of a workflow hacks episode meant to help you speed up your workflow. This is the Self-Recording Band Podcast, the show where we help you make exciting records on your own, wherever you are, DIY style. Let's go. Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band Podcast. I am your host, and I'm here with my co-host and friend, Malcolm Owen Flood. How are you, Malcolm?
Hello, I'm good, Benny. How are you, man?
I'm good, thank you.
Awesome. For some reason, right before we started this, I was like, I need water. And then now we're recording, and I'm like, it's too late. But I've been putting cinnamon in my coffee, and it's like the most. You've probably seen the cinnamon challenge, right?
Nope.
What? Oh, that's like a sensation. It's when people like put like a teaspoon of cinnamon into their mouth and try not to cough.
Really?
And it's like impossible. You can't
Really?
succeed. You haven't seen that. Bands were doing it all over the place. It was like this hilarious thing.
I want to try that now.
I've been drinking it in my coffee, but it definitely like dries out your voice quite a bit. But I'll be fine. Let's go. Let's record. Yeah. And don't try it in your studio, man. You'll have cinnamon over everything.
Yeah, it sounds like it. No, I don't. I won't do that. But I want to try it now because I just want to know if it's really possible. But yeah, I can imagine that it's hard.
I would suggest watching some before you try it.
But where would you where did you want to go with this? Like, why cinnamon in your coffee and what?
Oh, just because I don't even know. I was like, I need water because my voice is. I feel like I'm going to like cough and stuff now. This is just a waste of our listeners' times.
That's one of the weirdest podcast intros that we ever had, I think. But yeah, I mean, we're in episode 50, by the way, now, which is kind of crazy.
Hey, that's a better thing to talk about. Yeah.
Yep. So like this is really interesting and amazing because it still feels like it's pretty brand new, but we've almost got a whole year of episodes now.
Yeah.
Every single week. It's awesome.
Crazy. Yeah. Thank you all very much for listening. It's been a blast, and we don't plan on stopping. So
exactly.
Hooray.
Yeah. And now after like the last couple of episodes, within the last couple of episodes, we started doing a lot of things where we answered questions from the audience or invited people and just brought in outside like voices to the show. And this episode is like, it's not an interview episode, but it's also something that came up in the community and that we just immediately acted on and thought we could do an episode on it. And that was that we had a question in the community where someone asked which kind of key commands or hotkeys we use or people use in general. And that's a very interesting topic because, I mean, to us, it's just natural to do that. Like if you're working professionally in the studio, you need to be fast and you need to have an efficient workflow. So key commands are key. And so you need to know those, of course. But I can remember when I started that I did everything with a mouse for a long time, pretty long time. And then I started to use basic key commands, and then I got into the more advanced stuff. And it was a very long time actually until I got to macros and other workflow hacks and like speeding up things. It really took a while. So we think that a lot of you listening might be slower than you could be, and you could have a lot more fun and you could be a lot faster recording your tracks if you knew about a couple of really handy tricks and things you can do. And that's why this episode is sort of a recording workflow hacks episode meant to help you speed up your workflow.
Yeah. I've actually heard of people getting really big gigs because of how fast they are with their DAW. Their technical proficiency and speed and just ability to, I kind of like akin it to playing an instrument. If you treat your DAW like an instrument you're learning and become more proficient at it, that can actually have like a crazy impact on your life. It has for me. I take speed extremely seriously. And I was with you. I didn't even realize it was a thing. I mean, I kind of like always wanted to be as fast as I could, but I didn't realize how much learning shortcuts could impact making a record.
Oh yeah.
because it's not just for your own benefit, it's also for the musicians in the rooms, which sometimes, obviously, for listeners to this podcast is you. But if you have a singer waiting for you to comp a vocal so that they can try another take, and you're trying to just like navigate and drag things around with your mouse, they're going to lose inspiration by the time you get it done. So your job is to make it seamless, and shortcuts are the only way to make that happen, really. Shortcuts and good workflow hacks.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, you can completely kill the vibe of a session if you don't use things like that. And I remember when I did my first couple of projects, it was always this like, okay, now we're doing another instrument or another take or whatever, and I need to now add a track, and then I need to label it, and I need to color it, and I need to assign an input. And wait, now I accidentally copied something that isn't supposed to be there, and now all these steps, and it took forever. Where now, if someone wants to do another take, I just hit 2 buttons and we're good to go, baby.
Right.
Depending on what we're doing, but it's a totally different thing. And back then, it was like every single change to the session was like tedious.
Yeah.
and that's the way many people work, I assume, still work. And so it doesn't have to be that way.
Absolutely. It actually gets way more fun and creative once you have this stuff down, because you don't feel like you're trying to learn a new language and by like looking for menus and scrolling through menu bars trying to find the option that you're looking for. It just becomes very intuitive, and your mind is now freed up to focus on the music side of things again. Side note, It was Josh Wilbur. That's who I'm thinking of that got a gig. He got a gig working for Andy Sneap just because he was freaking good at Pro Tools. That's pretty cool.
That's pretty damn cool. Yeah.
Working for one of the world's biggest mixers because of that. Yeah. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, and I can totally see that. And like things like assisting on sessions or editing, stuff like that, the speed is so important. I had a couple of sessions myself where I outsourced drum editing before I got Thomas, who does it all now, where I just needed a whole album of drum tracks within like 2 days or something crazy like that. Right. And like not everyone can do that, but I found some people who could, and they not only like they did excellent work in like with a turnaround of like 24 hours or 2 days or so. We're like, I don't even know how, because I couldn't do it that fast, probably to the level that they did it with that quality. But there are people who are just that fast.
Yeah,
and that's fascinating, and I can totally see that they get gigs because of that, because that's so invaluable to producers and musicians and studios. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that's like another level of getting fast, because that's, you learn all the basic stuff and then you specialize at a task like drum editing. You're going to get really good. Same thing for vocal tuning. That's my favorite thing to outsource, because people that get good at that are just so much quicker. And yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. So because of the fact that every DAW is so different and key commands and like shortcuts are different for every DAW, we won't really go over specific shortcuts to learn for you. You got to figure that out yourself or make your own depending on which DAW you're in. But we're going to go first. I think we're going to go through a list of basic key commands that we use that exist in every DAW in some way, shape, or form. So we're just going to tell you what it is, what the things are that we speed up. And you just got to find out what the key commands are in your software, or create your own shortcuts depending on how if your DAW lets you do that.
Yeah, highly recommend getting a notepad out for this episode so you can write down things. There's not going to be an easy one to remember stuff. So pretty much we'll tell you the function of what we're doing, and not the actual buttons we press on the keyboard, because those will change for whatever software you are using. But as long as you know that the function can be done using your keyboard, that's the important thing. And you just need to figure out how to bridge that gap on your own.
Yeah, exactly. So let's start with the real basics.
Yep.
And that's something you mentioned before we started this episode, and I think you're totally right. I would probably have skipped this, but it's important to mention it. So things like hit record, start, and stop the playback. Sounds very simple, but there are probably a lot of people out there who still do that with their mouse. Mm-hmm. So before you navigate to the play and record icons, just hit the spacebar or the whatever key it is that activates recording, and do it that way. And just get used to it instead of using the mouse. That's the first step, I guess.
Yeah, that is a huge one. It's like the dead giveaway of a a newbie. They grab the mouse and go looking for the round button to record arm things and then click the play button after. It's so much quicker just to have, I mean, I'm not going to say what it is, but anyways, it'll be one, maybe two buttons on your keyboard, and it'll be instantaneous. And you'll love not grabbing a mouse for that.
Yeah.
On that note, you also need to know how to get back to the start of the session with a single click, so that you can just because I mean, that's something that you hear all the time. Can we just listen to the song start to finish? Let's just refresh ourselves. And you just have to know which button gets you back to the beginning of the timeline, and then which button starts the playback.
Yeah, absolutely. Then you already said it, like ARM tracks or solo tracks, mute tracks, those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these are also like basics that you just need to know how to do them. It's I guess it's a little different from DAW to DAW, because maybe you need to figure out how to select the track you actually want to arm or so, but there is a way to do it without having to use the mouse, and it's probably quicker than doing that. So those basic functions on every track, you need to know how to do that. The navigation, a big one. You said navigating up and down on a track. What do you mean by that?
I mean between tracks, not on a track.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, if you have like kick, snare, tom, overheads, and you want to just listen to the second tom, you need to be able to get down there. And that's generally quicker just using a button that goes kind of like transports up and down tracks rather than grabbing your mouse, scrolling through your window and finding the one. And then, of course, that ties into the solo. So you navigate to that track and then use your solo shortcut once you're on that track, and now you're listening to just that track. There's a little more that goes into this because there's groups and stuff like that, which you absolutely need to understand. That's not on our list, I don't think. But learn how to make groups, which is just parameters get linked between certain tracks. And there is a shortcut for doing that too. If you're selecting tracks by hand and then going up into your menu bar to find that, that's too slow.
Yeah.
Find the shortcut for that as well. But being able to navigate the session with your keyboard will feel really good once you get it down. There's one more little note on that. This is kind of a workflow method more than a key command. But something I like to do with like vocals especially is I'll have one track that is a tracking playlist, or track, I guess. And then below it, I'll have my arrangement. So there'll be my tracking track, and then below it, there'll be my lead vocal track, and then below it, there'll be my double, and then my other doubles, pan left, pan right, and then my harmonies and all that. And then maybe I'll have like an alt one. And instead of comping on the track I'm recording to, I'm just dragging down good parts onto their necessary tracks, kind of things. So if I'm like, oh, that was really good, but not quite perfect, I might just throw that down onto the double track, and now my double's already partly done, kind of thing. And it's kind of just a method I like to do. But being able to not jump between tracks with my keyboard and command, just Command C, Command V, paste things all over the place, it's so much quicker than trying to use a mouse to do that.
Oh yeah, that's a good one actually. You've mentioned that in an episode, I think, before. I've heard that. I've heard.
I do it for guitars as well. Pretty much whenever there's more than one track, like bass is normally just going on to bass, so it's not really necessary. But if I'm going to have like a left and a right, I'll normally have a tracking track. I call it a tracking track, which is a stupid name. Got to figure that out. And then my comping tracks below it, and I'll just move them down onto that.
Yeah. What that also helps with is a problem. I don't know if that's an issue in Pro Tools, but in Cubase, there's this thing. If you're monitoring through Cubase, you can, and you arm a track, you have to enable the monitoring on that track if you want to hear in real time if you want to hear the input basically. And if you don't activate that track, you're going to hear the playback. So you can either hear the input or what's on the track. So usually when you are recording and comping on the same track, you need to engage the monitoring when the singer is performing, and then when you want to listen to the take, you need to deactivate the monitoring.
Yes.
Which is kind of tedious. So what I do here is I duplicate the track, and I have the monitoring on the track that I'm not recording to, so that I can just leave it on and record to the other track. But your method basically helps with that as well, because you have that one track that has always that you can leave monitoring on, and then you just drag the stuff down to the actual track that you can then listen to. So
exactly.
Cool.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
It's
Awesome.
pretty smooth.
Yeah. The navigating the sessions left to right is also a big one. Yeah. Like you said, like memory locations here. I assume you mean like chorus, verse, intro, like the sections of the song. Yeah. That's a big one too. I didn't do that for a long, long time. I only started doing that not too long ago, actually. And I don't know why. And I don't know how I was even able to work like that, because now I have every section of the song I have a marker there that I can jump to with a shortcut. And if I want to hear the chorus now, I hit a button and jump to the chorus. And if I want to hear the verse, I do the same. And now when I'm mixing, Thomas, when he preps the mixing sessions, he will do that. He will go through the song and make those markers for me.
Nice.
And whenever I track a session, so like on Saturday, I had a vocal tracking session here. And before we started, I just went through the song with the band and they told me, okay, this is the intro, this is the verse, this is the chorus, this is whatever. And we just made those markers real quick. And it takes 10 minutes to do that or 5 minutes to do that, but then it will save you so much time during the session because communication will be so much easier. Because if someone says, let's do a double in the chorus real quick, you don't have to ask where the chorus is or search for it, or you just jump to the chorus and there you are. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really quick, again, intuitive, because people don't want to sit there waiting to hear the part they're thinking about right now. They have an idea they need to hear like right away. And it's amazing because we're talking about all these things which are obviously hugely important for recording, but I bet we use these every day when we're mixing as well. Like our brain needs that as we're making mixing decisions as well. Like we just need to hear the part we're thinking about instant.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Totally, yeah. Yeah, the next one is one that I can't really talk about because it's like Beat Detective is Pro Tools specific. There is something like that in Cubase that basically works the same way. So pretty
much figure out what your primary editing tool is inside of your DAW and figure out how to get it up really quick.
Yeah. And there are shortcuts in every DAW. Like in Cubase, it's like you select a track, you create hit points, which is like the transients, like that the same thing Beat Detective does. And then you hit a button to slice the track, and then you hit the button to quantize it, and then you hit a button to do the crossfades. Yeah. And basically with 3 buttons, you've edited a whole song of drum tracks, and then you just need to go in and fix hits that might be off. But basically with 3 buttons, you can quantize a whole song of drums,
Right. Yeah, which can be super valuable to know if you need to just make that happen really quick. I use that fade, like the batch fading function of that all the time. So Command 8, I've got it on lock. Happens every day. Yeah,
Cubase is just X. If I have a comp, like if we just chop like things up and we end up with a lot of cuts, I don't do every fade after every time I cut, but I do all the cuts.
Yeah.
And then I select everything, hit X, and then everything's crossfaded.
Yeah.
And I even got a template in the crossfade window so that when I do that, all the crossfades are like 10 milliseconds and equal power and like, all those parameters that you can set there so that you have the same starting point and not random crossfades.
Yeah, I don't know if that's on our list even, but learning batch fades is important and save you a lot of time. Yeah. If you're getting pops and clicks in your comps, you got to learn that, batch fades. Another thing worth mentioning, I think, is that while we use all of these functions that we're talking about, and we're just getting started, we have a lot to go. I bet if somebody asked me like to recite what the key command is, I might get some wrong because it's just muscle memory. And that's important, I think, to understand is you don't have to remember what they are. You just have to learn them. Your hands have to learn them. And most of you are musicians, so you probably understand what I mean by that.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you what frets I play some of my songs on, but I could play it for you.
Totally. That's for me. One thing is we get to that, but to me, the thing that I couldn't tell you right now is the workspaces thing in Cubase. So there are shortcuts. Like workspaces in Cubase is a certain arrangement of windows, like which plugins are open, where they are on the screen, what windows are open, and what you're looking at basically at a moment in time. Like that is a workspace. And you can, whatever you're looking at right now, you can save that as a workspace, and then you can make a different window configuration, open different plugins, jump to a different spot in the session, and save that as a workspace. And then there's a shortcut to switch between those workspaces. And I don't know, I couldn't tell you. I just hit, I think it's option, it's option, and then a number, like for all these different workspaces.
Right.
But I don't know, I just do it.
Yeah.
And this is also very handy for navigating a session. So I have one workspace for where it only shows me the edit window. So it's full screen editing window, and it's like start to end of the song, like the whole song on one screen. It's like one click of a button. Another one is the mix window, all the faders, full screen.
Right.
Another one is called metering, where I have an ultra wide screen. So the left side of the screen will be the edit window, the right side will be the mix window, and on spots on the screen where it doesn't cover anything important, there will be metering plugins that I need. So with one click, I can see an analyzer on the master, I can see a VU meter on the mix bus, and I can see certain gain staging things that are relevant to me. So that's the metering workspace. And then there is like a show me all the buses workspace, or like stuff like that, or show me all the drum tracks, So I have like numbers 1 to 9, like show me with one click all the things that I need if I want to do a certain thing.
Awesome. Yeah, I think there is something like that. And I mean, a couple of those are definitely built into Pro Tools just default, but the really custom ones, I got to look into that more. I'm writing it down now, folks.
Yeah, that's super handy. And I get to a more advanced use of those later, which is not difficult to do, but it's super cool. Yeah, like navigating the section, basically. Do everything you can to make that as smooth and intuitive as possible so you don't have to think about it. And if someone needs to hear or see something, you just hit some button and then there you go. So you need to get to that point.
Yep. This is not a key command, but it is definitely a workflow hack that I think we've talked about in the past. But having some template sessions, like for tracking, in my case, I've got a tracking template and a mixing template, and I think I'm just going to make them the same soon. But anyways, they're different for now. And it just has like all the tracks that I'm almost definitely going to need. It's going to have the click track already in there. It's going to have a scratch vocal and a scratch guitar track sitting there ready to be recorded too, with the inputs already selected. It'll have, a little default reverb and delay on that vocal. It'll have headphone monitoring all set up and bussed and ready to go, routed. And my go-to drum tracks, I'm going to need a kick mic. I'm going to need a snare mic. So why don't they already exist? And that probably saves me like a half hour a song, right? Like, and I'm quick with Pro Tools, so it'd save a slow person at least an hour.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I've got one in every studio I work at as well, because I do drums at a bunch of different studios. So that's the first thing I do when I go to one is I make a template.
Yeah.
Like, okay, that's my starting point.
Totally. Also the routing, like buses and stuff, you want to have probably a drum bus, just a group. Yep. Even if you don't mix, you want to have just one fader where you can mute or solo the whole drum kit. So why not just have in the template all the basic drum tracks that you're always going to have, like kick, snare, toms, overheads, rooms, or whatever it is that you always use, and route all those to a group and have that in the template. And same with like all rhythm guitars go to one bus, or all lead guitars, or all the vocals, stuff like that.
Exactly.
Already routed, already ready to go. Maybe you want some plugins there, maybe not, but just the routing alone saves so much time. And definitely pre-configure that, because it will be the same every single time.
The plugins is a good point. I've got an EQ just sitting on every track. It's like probably going to want it. It's there. If I don't, that's fine.
Yeah, or like different options. Like this gets more into mixing now, but for example, I have like 3 or 4 different mix bus compressors sitting there deactivated, but they are already there, so I don't need to go through the plugins folder. My go-to choices are there, and I just can switch between them and see what works best. Or like same with drum compressors. So I have a small selection of the plugins that I'm really going to use, versus like going through 30 compressors trying to find the one,
Yeah, definitely. That's a great idea. Benny, totally unrelated note that's going to bore our listeners again, but is that a bunch of snow outside of your door? The lighting changed on your rear door there, and I can see out of it. You've got a lot of snow.
Yes.
Right on.
Yeah, absolutely.
To make you jealous, on Friday, I was sitting on a beach having a beer in the sun.
Shit. Yeah, that would be really cool right now. I mean, I kind of like the winter, but summer would be better right now.
I mean, it is so weird on the island. We had, maybe 2 weeks ago, we had like a foot of snow. And then on Friday, I was sitting in the sun having a beer. It's like the weirdest thing. I get a t-shirt on a beach. I'm like, what? How is this possible?
Where were you?
This is where I live, Vancouver Island. Yeah, that's just how it is here.
Shit.
In the last 2 weeks, we've had a windstorm, snowstorm, and then t-shirt weather.
That's crazy, man. No, you can't wear a t-shirt right now outside. Not at all. Like I saw like, we need to get back to the episode, but I saw a really funny meme today, like a really funny picture. Lasse Lammert, the guitar player? Like
I don't think so.
Lasse Lammert, who did a lot of
yes, I do. Yeah, I do.
Who did a lot of like Kemper packs and stuff, and he's like a guitar expert and well known in the metal scene, especially as a mix engineer and guitar player and stuff. And he just posted a meme where there was like a guy with a scarf and a hat and a beanie, like a...
Okay, toque.
Yeah, exactly. And it just said, "The air hurts my face why do I live somewhere where the air hurts my face? I could so relate to that because like that's what it feels outside right now. You go outside and the air hurts your face. That's the weather we have now.
That's how I feel about everybody else in Canada living like in the rest of Canada. I'm like, why? Why don't you? I don't get it.
All right. Funny. So, and the last one of the basics here is the activate click track. So, basic one again, but still, you need to know how to do that, and don't use the mouse for that. Don't search for the click icon. Just know how to turn it on and off.
Yeah. These are things that we use every single day. So they're just, you got to get them to be way quicker, and it'll free up a lot of your time and mental capacity.
Absolutely, yeah. Now we get into the more, not more interesting, but like little more advanced stuff. And there's a couple of really interesting things here coming up. Not only shortcuts and key commands, but general workflow hacks, speed hacks.
Yes.
So, I'm curious to hear yours, Malcolm.
Okay.
Talk us through a bunch of yours on your list here.
Why don't we'll do it this way. I'll read one off my list and explain it, and then you'll read one off your list and explain it. We'll jump back and forth like that. That sound good?
Okay, sound good.
Okay. So this first one for me, I love doing when I can, but it kind of requires having enough gear to make it possible and the space and all that. But I like to set up what I call stations. So you might have a mic sitting in a vocal booth or two or whatever, and then a guitar amp mic'd up somewhere else, and then a bass DI sitting in the control room or whatever. And essentially now we don't have to batch all of the bass at once, although we could, and maybe you should. But if we want to, we can just instantly grab another instrument and it's already rigged up, ready to go, and there's like a tone and levels already done. And the most often use case of this would be vocals, because I don't like in the vocalist to sing everything all like the way through and blowing out their voice and getting tired. And just want them to be excited every time they're in there and keep it into small chunks. So I'll usually have like guitar going, and then once we finish a rhythm track, we're going to move over and do vocals for a song. And then we can come back and do guitars, or we can do bass, whatever, because those stations are still set up. We didn't have to repatch and use the same gear. So this only works if you have enough preamps generally and whatever other gear you need. But it can really be a nice way to keep workflow fresh and exciting and moving.
Absolutely. And you don't really need that much gear. Like an 8-channel interface lets you do that. Once you're done with drums, you can start doing that. So you could have 1 or 2 channels for bass. You could have a couple of channels for guitar, and you would still have like a channel for the vocals and maybe one for gang shouts or whatever.
Exactly.
So that would be pretty easy. You need the microphones though. That's the only thing.
Yes.
But but I guess it's not too complicated to do, and I love that way of working. I didn't do it for a long time, but I definitely do it now. I have a band here right now to record a record with me, and we have that exact thing going. So to the left of me, there's a JCM 800, and below that is a 5150, and both are connected to cabs in my my live room with the microphones ready to go. And there's a vocal mic in there, and there is a bass DI set up and a bass cap mic'd in there, and we can switch between all those things, and super easy, super smooth. Yeah,
very cool. Yeah, because if somebody gets tired, it sucks pushing them. Just let them have a break and do something else.
Totally. Yeah, I can totally see that being valuable. I don't know why I batch things for so long, especially with the vocalists. Like, it's so dumb to have a vocalist, especially if you're in a time crunch. Like if you have a deadline and a vocalist has to sing a whole record in like 2 or 3 days, it's just not a good idea.
Not
really.
Fun. No, not fun. Drummers, they have to suffer.
They have to suffer, unfortunately, yeah. Unless you have the luxury of a really big live room and a lot of microphones and preamps, they'll
and budget.
And also teching drums is a thing as well. If it takes too long to track drums, you're going to end up needing to change the heads too often and retune stuff. Yeah. So you just want to get that out of the way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay,
all
cool.
Right, you go.
Makes sense. My first one here is track DI and mic on one stereo track or to one stereo track. That sounds a little advanced or weird maybe to some people, but what I mean by this is sometimes when I do that myself sometimes, but I really like to do that when I work remotely with bands who record themselves, because if I can't be there to quality control, so to make sure that if they're recording a DI and an amp, that it's actually in sync and like that the two tracks are, that the phase is always the same, that that it's the same take on both those tracks. If I can't control those things, because it can get messed up. You can accidentally comp make two different comps on a DI and an amp track, and it can get all messed up. So if I can't be there to control that, I just tell them to record to a stereo track and have them, like you assign, let's say you have a 2-channel interface and you assign channel 1, you plug the microphone in channel 1 and the DI in channel 2 or so, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And then you make one stereo track in your DAW and you record the amp to the left side and the DI to the right side. And all you need to do then is a plugin that lets you sum it to mono. So there are plugins, like most DAWs have them built into it, but there are free plugins that just have a mono button. You hit it and you get a mono thing, and then you can pan. You can use the pan on the track to switch between the amp or the DI, depending on what you want to hear. So you can, if the amp is on the right, you can have the pan all the way to the right, hit the mono button, and you only hear the amp. And
right.
And the DI will just get tracked to the same track, but you don't hear it. And when they send the stuff over to me, I have 2 tracks that are perfectly in sync, and it makes editing easier. It makes sure that things are always together as they should. It's always the same take, and that's a little neat workflow that I really like. And you can get more advanced with that. You can do some crazy things. You can have, if you have dual mono plugins, you can have an amp sim on the DI and blend it with the mic using the pan knob and stuff like that. So
I never thought of that. That's cool.
You could do stuff like that on one track, which can be pretty neat. So
that's something that I haven't adopted, but I've been hearing about it for a while. I keep thinking about it. I'm just kind of an old man stuck in my ways, but I'll give it a shot next time, I promise.
I don't do it as often here because I don't really like the thought process, like having those things on one track and then what gets summed and do I mix the DI with the mic and all that shit, and some plugins do it differently than others. So it's a little advanced. I just do it and I give them specific plugins to do it so I can make sure that it works. But I just make people do it if we don't trust or they don't trust themselves that they can do it without messing things up. And if I can't be there to quality control, that's just a way to work around that.
Yeah. Now, do you have a plugin that you recommend off the top of your head?
Yeah, I use what's the Brainworks one? I don't know the name at the top of my head. It's like BX Solo, I think it's called.
Okay.
Where you can solo the mid and side and left and right and mono and all those options. I use that for that.
I think that's a free one, isn't it?
Could be. Yeah, could be. And there are a couple of free ones. There's one called Panipulator. That's definitely free.
It is free. Just anybody interested, it's free, which I'm downloading right now.
The BX one or which one?
BX Solo is free. Yeah,
I think that's the one. And you can do it with that, and it's pretty neat.
Yeah, I'm gonna give that a shot. The only reason I hadn't was because I didn't really have a plugin off the top of my head that was going to be convenient for that. I could pull up a dual mono EQ and then unlink and then go to the left and drag the volume down on the input and output, and then it just seemed like a pain in the asses. Yeah. But cool.
And I think I explained it wrong. I mean, that's one of the things where I cannot really explain it. I just know how to do it because I think the right way to do it is you need to first select either left or right and then hit mono because you don't want to sum the thing and then pan it. You want to hit. You want to select one of those things, then hit mono so that you hear it in coming out of the middle. That's the way to do it, not the other way around. So
I'm looking at the plugin right now. It'll be obvious for anybody that tries this out.
Yeah, exactly. That's one thing. Okay,
cool. That brings me to mine, which is very related, and that's just recording a DI, even if you don't plan to reamp. And that's definitely a misconception I've heard, is that people think that DIs are just for the purpose of changing the tone later, which is something I almost never do. I mean, I do reamp and I love doing it. It's fun, but it's never my goal. I'm always trying to capture the amp on the way in. So the DI is actually more of a visual tool for editing a lot of the time. It's very you can't really edit a heavily distorted amp sound easily, I should say. It's not fun. And a DI will make it a lot easier. And they can also be little lifesavers, if there's something out of tune, you can fix it there. There's all sorts of stuff you can do with the DI. So I'm just hugely team always record a DI no matter what. Even if it's an acoustic guitar and it's got a plug-in, I'm still going to do it.
Yeah, agreed. Same here. I rarely reamp if I do the tracking just because I kind of know what I'm doing, what I'm going for, and I just go with whatever I record. But for the visual reference, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And why not record it? I mean, it doesn't do any harm, so just record it.
Yeah.
I think it was Jay Moss on the URM podcast who was talking about a session, and he was like, we didn't even track the eyes on that session because we're punk as fuck, you know. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool, but
that's the only reason if you're punk.
Because we're punk as fuck. But yeah, I mean, why not record the eye? So
yeah, that's funny. I like that.
Yeah. So yeah, track of the eye. You will see where the transients are, and you will see where. Yeah, it's just handy. It's just no reason
Definitely
not to. All right, cool. On that same topic, this is one that I love recently. I do that on the session right now here, and there's multiple reasons why I love that. So what I do is I'll track a DI, so I have the guitar plugged into a good DI. That's the only thing I directly record. Then the output of that DI track in the DAW is routed to a physical output, which goes into a reamp box, which goes into the amp, and then the microphone is set up and like it captures the amp and it records back in. So I'm kind of reamping in real time. So the guitar doesn't go to the amp, it goes to the computer, out of the computer, in the amp, and then the mic comes in. So there is a latency between the DI and the mic if you do that, but you're only going to listen to the amp anyway. You need to have an interface and a software that's capable of very, very low latency in order to do that, because you need to have a round trip of like only a couple of milliseconds in order to make that work. Because you're going in and out of the computer and you want to still monitor.
Right. So you are listening to that reamped signal as you perform.
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
And the beauty of that is two things. First of all, if you're tracking and you find that after tracking you really like the take, but you think, that could have used a little more gain or something, you don't need to set anything up. You just hit play, turn up the gain. The reamp is already set up. You just re-record it without having to play it again, and there you go. So you have the reamp setup going while you're tracking. So you can make adjustments to parts without having to play it again during tracking, which is super awesome.
Yeah, so that is very cool.
That's super cool. And the other beautiful thing is you can use your plugins while you're tracking, because you have access to the DI before it hits the amp. So we had a couple of parts yesterday or last week where we tracked the DIs, and we were like, oh, let's try a tremolo here, or let's try a delay and some reverb or whatever. And you can use a pedal board, of course, but you would either have to have that big pedal board in your signal all the time, which you shouldn't do, or you would need to patch in and out stuff. And if you just want to move quickly without degrading the signal, you can just use whatever digital plugins, pedal boards you have, or other plugins. You can go crazy with it, or you can use clippers or whatever, because you have access to the DI. You can manipulate it before it hits the amp. So we tracked a bunch of delay tracks or reverb tracks using pedals that come with the newer DSP plugins, for example. Or we just turned the amp off when we turned the cab off and just used the pedals from those plugins.
Right. That's very cool.
Yeah, or we use like Sound Toys stuff or crazy tremolo things that are only possible in the digital world, and we send that stuff to the amp and use it while we're tracking, and that's so fun. So I really enjoy that sort of setup. The only thing you need to do afterwards is you need to compensate if you want to reamp or if you want to blend, let's say Sims with the actual recording. You need to compensate for the latency between the DI and the mic track, because there will be a latency, of course.
Right.
But,
do you have a method that you like to use for making sure you get that right?
Mostly by ear, but yeah, there is a method. The same method that I use basically if I want to make sure two mics are in phase. I just have the guitar player do a quick little impulse, just a little pick click on the string, and like I watch that, and it gives you a really clear transient spike in the DAW, and you can just use that and move it so that it like overlaps perfectly.
Right.
And, yeah.
I use a signal generator and just make a little blip of white noise, and then that once it's recorded back in, I can see like a little, okay, it's that many samples.
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I do have a question. This might be a little technical. This is a technical podcast, whatever.
Yeah.
Are you sending it out, an output inside of your DAW, or is it happening just in your interfaces, total mix kind of? I think you've got an RME, right?
Yeah.
So is that called total mix? I think
it's called total mix. Yeah. No, I
don't.
Is
it happening in there?
No, it's in Cubase because I want to use the plugin. So I track to a track in Cubase, and the output of that track is sent to a physical output,
Right.
And then I can use the plugins. And the buffer is set to minimum so that I don't have... It's like, that's the cool thing about the RME interface, at least like mine. It's like super, super low latency. I can have like 1 millisecond in and out or something. And it's like...
Right. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I'm going to have to look into the UA world and see what it can handle in that domain.
Yeah. But I highly encourage you, if you can do that, if you can pull it off with low enough latency, I highly encourage you to try that because it's such a fun way to work. Even just the fact that you could just hit play and change the amp tone without having to set something up, it's awesome.
Yeah, going back to DIs and why they're totally worth doing it, especially for like the people that are into like really fast, shreddy music that's like really technical and has to be perfect, DIs are capable of being mutated in much more than a recorded amp signal. Like you can stretch them and like use all these kind of weird pitch stuff and all this stuff that you can't really do to an amp sound because it's too complex. And it sounds fine, and then you reamp it and it sounds totally good, including like chopping up, doing really hard edits. You can like really butcher something, and if you did it to the amp sound, it would be awful. But if you do it to the DI and then reamp it, it's totally invisible and works great. So if you were in a tough situation and your guitarist just wasn't up to the task of playing that part, you could record the DI, edit it to snot, and then reamp it out, and you'd probably get away with it. So that's a super cool method you've got there.
Cool. Yeah. And I forgot one benefit as well here, and that is if you're planning on reamping anyways, so if you have in mind that you want to like borrow some amp to do the reamps or whatever it is that you want to do, if that's the plan, then so I had, for example, I'm mixing a record right now for a band who like they tracked rather quickly and focused on the performance because they knew they were gonna reamp later and then focus on the tone. So they kind of split it up into two different parts of it. And if you know that you're gonna reamp anyway, another beautiful thing about this method is that you already know how the amp reacts to the reamp signal, because an amp sounds different if you plug right into it versus if you reamp through it. Like it's not going to be the same. You're always going to have to do some matching. If you, I don't know, like it's the impedance. It's like a reamp signal is not exactly the same as the one that comes out of the guitar. There's the conversion, there's the preamp, but there's also like probably an impedance and a couple other things at play. So when you track like that, you intuitively adjust the amp to work with that reamp signal without you having to think about it. You just do it and make it sound good just as you would. And then when you reamp later, that's already perfect. You don't need to do anything because the amp is already set to respond to the reamp signal the way it should.
Right. Yeah, that's really cool. It's good thought. I got an Evertune guitar a little while back. I probably mentioned it on the podcast. I can't remember if I did, actually. Maybe I didn't. But I got one. And at first, it was garbage. It was set up really bad right from the factory. It was out of tune, which is the whole point of an Evertune is that they're super in tune. And then I changed the strings and didn't realize that I couldn't go that heavy, and it didn't work out. So I had to go back and finally got it going good. And Diego, who we had on the podcast 3 episodes ago now, I think.
Yeah.
I think. And if you haven't listened to that episode, it's a must listen. My God, that was a good episode. But I got him on Facebook Messenger Zoom call thing, and he talked me through it a little bit, and I've got it set up now, and I am so excited about this thing. I'm now so converted that I'm like, anybody that's serious about self-recording and just wants to like save years of learning how to properly record guitars should just consider an Evertune mandatory. Like, it's just that simple. As soon as you have one, your guitars are going to be really good.
yeah, totally agreed here. There are people who don't like the Evertunes for their sound, but I say, like, even if they sound a little worse than without it, it's worth it. It's so worth it compared to the tuning nightmare that you get with some guitars. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the intonation, like becoming good at intonation, takes years of practice to really understand how to do that well, and hear it properly.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing for like a bit of hard truth for DIY people that have sent me stuff to mix, is that is the most commonly lacking thing in the guitars is the tuning.
Totally.
And you might think it's great, but it's like, there's a difference.
Yeah.
And this will sound awesome.
Totally. People don't realize how important it is. They don't even hear it in the beginning. I think I couldn't hear it for a long time because it didn't bother me, and now it bothers me all the time, to the point where I think I'm going crazy because I can't believe that always something always seems off now. I'm so sensitive to this. Like, it's like something's always off. I kind of doubt myself sometimes because I think maybe it's me, but you get so sensitive but it matters. It matters so much. And like the scenario that I'm in right now, I wish I had an Evertune here right now, because what we are dealing with is, I'm going to show you real quick. We have one guitarist plays with this ESP thing here. Yeah, that's super super in tune. It's like well set up, super in tune, no problems there. The other guitar is also well set up, and we made sure everything is good. But the other guitar is just a standard Tele and just a Fender Telecaster.
Is that a 3-saddle, or I can't really tell?
They have these jumbo frets, and like they are like, it's a different sort of guitar, and it just, compared to the ESP guitar, it's so difficult to set up and to keep in tune, and those two together is such a nightmare that I just wish we had an Evertune, because getting that to work is such a pain. It sounds awesome and it's fun to work, of course, but still, we spend as much time tuning as we spend playing, almost. Like,
exactly.
Really.
Yeah.
And that's just how it is. And in the beginning, like on the first day, bands sometimes are a little confused and surprised that it is that way. But it's what it is. And I've talked to so many producers on all sorts of levels, and it is that way. There's no way around it. You need to do that. And with an Evertune, you don't. At least not as much.
Yeah. One of the biggest differences between a massive budget, because I had the pleasure of making a really big budget album, and the difference is time. And it's just that time is spent making sure that tuning is perfect.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. And if you're wondering what the difference is between a pro vocal and mediocre vocals, is in tune instruments under that vocal, because your singer can't sing in tune if your guitars are out of tune. It's just not possible. So it's so important. And Evertune, if you're listening, just email us. We'll send you our address. You can send us free shit. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that would be the dream sponsor.
Yeah, they've got an Evertune bass coming. Apparently, there's a prototype in the works, and I'm so excited. I'm going to buy one for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, seriously. But really, seriously, if you consider buying a guitar, consider buying an Evertune. All the standard guitars are available with an Evertune. I would say most of them.
Yeah.
And if not, you can. There's probably some. I don't know what they are called. Authorized. I don't know. Guy or
authorized
girl
dealer,
or whatever dealer.
Tricky in Canada, I found. But you can get them, and they are not as confusing as you think. Once you wrap your head around it, you'll understand what's going on.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that's a big one. Awesome. Yeah. So the next one here on my list is macros, and that's sort of key commands. We've already talked about that, but macros is, I don't know if what you can do in Pro Tools when it comes to that, but Cubase is pretty good at that. So it's a chain of key commands, of hotkeys, that you can activate with one key or one shortcut that you set. So you can say, create 8 tracks, label them red, call them whatever, route them to a bus, and then do whatever. So you can have like all these individual shortcuts, hotkeys. You can make a chain, and you can trigger them with one shortcut.
Yeah,
that's a simple version of a macro. You can do really complicated things there. You can come up with all sorts of workflows, and you can really condense complex lists of tasks to one action that you need to perform, and then let the computer do the rest. It's super powerful, and I love it. And I need to get into more, because I don't really use it to not at all, like to its full potential, not even close to it. But I use some of them, and I've created some, and it's so awesome.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely cool. Pro Tools is less developed in that realm. I use a tool called Keyboard Maestro to kind of pull off some stuff like that, which is a third-party thing that you can kind of make shortcuts in. And there is, you can make some custom shortcuts, but it's pretty limited inside of just Pro Tools itself, using, the keyboard max settings. But it definitely is worth looking into. Pretty much to figure out if this would help you is start trying to realize tasks that you're doing over and over again in succession. And you'll figure out patterns. And once you determine a pattern, try and make a macro for it. And then you just saved hours of your life.
Yeah. Can be simple things like select all the events on the track, consolidate them to one audio file, and then normalize it, and then whatever. It's just stuff like that,
Right. We're at like 53 minutes, so we're going to start boogieing like hyperspeed here.
Yeah.
This one has been mentioned before, and people really liked it, so I think it's worth mentioning again in case there's new listeners or people didn't give it a shot. But muting the strings you're not playing on your guitar. Just grab a piece of paper towel or whatever you can, and or like those foam earplugs. Those are awesome. Really, you can manipulate those. Just make sure they haven't been used, and then you just mute the strings. Between the pickup and the string, it'll keep it dead, and then you don't have to be as tight of a guitar player, even though you should still try to be.
Yep.
But it just makes it cleaner.
Yeah, string mutes, absolutely. There are various techniques you can do. You can even if you're only doing a riff on the lowest three strings, you can just tape away like the other three strings that you don't need, or you can use the shred reps things or whatever. Various techniques, but just consider muting whatever is ringing and it's not supposed to be in there.
That just made me think that I'm going to do this the next time I have a piano and see what that sounds like.
That's a good idea, actually.
Sometimes those low strings just rumble whenever they click the sustain pedal and stuff like that, Okay, we got to be quick. Let's go.
Exactly. It can also be sort of part of the sound of a piano doing that.
Totally. Sometimes it's awesome.
Yeah, but that's a good thought. Awesome. Cool. As always, you can abuse those things as well to manipulate stuff, even if it's not supposed to be used that way. So, cool. The next one here is, when you're using direct monitoring. So when you're not monitoring through your DAW, but you're monitoring through something like Total Mix or your UAD console or whatever mixer comes with your interface. Or some interfaces, such as my small Steinberg interface, they have a hardware mix knob where you can blend between like playback and direct monitoring through the hardware. If you do something like that, so you get like zero latency monitoring through the hardware, and you still want to have like delay or reverb on your monitoring chain, it's cool to have like as Malcolm said, in your template, have a reverb and a delay track set up that's just wet only, like only reverb, only delay, and just send the track you're recording to those to the effect tracks, and only send that to the headphone. So you're not monitoring your actual recorded track through the DAW. That's dry, that's direct monitoring, but you're listening to the delay and the reverb. And if there is a latency, which is probably the reason for you wanting to do direct monitoring, it doesn't really matter, because like a delay and a reverb, you can use that with a little latency. So let's say you have a fully loaded session and you cannot track into it anymore without like latency, but you want to add some overdubs and you need to do direct monitoring, but you still want to have a delay on your vocal. Just route the delay only to the vocal and do the rest direct, and it works perfectly fine.
Awesome. Good one. This is one that's a little more new to my workflow, but I've been occasionally using auto-tune on a recording track. So you can get like no latency tuning plugins, like Waves Tune Real Time is actually a pretty good one. And the singer will actually sing with that on their track, and they're hearing it. And this isn't for everyone. They'll either hate it or they'll love it. But it's almost like you're singing along to the song, and it helps you just nail the pitch. You like hear it right away and you get there quicker. It's weird that it works. I didn't think it would work at all, but it has definitely helped in a lot of situations. Sometimes we're turning it on for parts and off for others or whatever, but totally worth knowing that that's an option.
Agreed. It helps them sing, and it's surprisingly good as well. Like it can,
I also like using it as like, sometimes singers get really self-critical, right? And they're like, that part's just no good. And I throw a tuning plug on and it sounds the exact same. I'm like, okay, it's in tune, man. It is. It just is. Or maybe it goes opposite and it like jumps to another note entirely. And you're like, okay, we're definitely too far off. Yeah. It's kind of like a guide if your ears can't tell.
Oh, yeah, totally. Do you ever commit it, or do you just put the plugin on the track and listen to it?
I just put it on. I've never committed an auto tune.
Okay.
I guess.
Okay, cool. Because I know people who do that because it actually can sound really good and they just trust that it works. I wouldn't do it probably, but it's just it's really that good. If you said it right, you could commit it. It's that good. But I wouldn't recommend it because you don't have to.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one is real quick. It's just an addition to the macros thing, and also to the workspaces thing that I mentioned in the beginning. I use an app called Stream Deck. There's an actual device. It's made for streamers. It's like a little pad with like it has the different configurations. There's one with I think 9 buttons and one with 15 and one with 30 buttons or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you can assign shortcuts, key commands, whatever. Everything your computer can do, basically, you can assign those commands to those keys, and with the press of a button, you can make your computer do something. So it's meant for streamers to trigger sound effects or switch camera angles or stuff like that. So it's like a little control deck that you have there. That's the purpose. But you can. It's widely used actually in a lot of fields now, and a lot of audio producers use it as well, because you can put all the key commands, macros, and whatever to those buttons. You can have different layers for different apps on your computer to use it. And I thought about buying one of these until I discovered that there is an iPad app that works just as well. Like, it's from the same company. You can just use your iPad and you don't have to buy the device, and the app is like way cheaper. And but the device is not as expensive as well. So I have my iPad here, and I can switch my workspaces to Cubase with the click of a button, and it just says edit, meter, bus, whatever. And I hit it, and it switches the different workspaces. Then there's a layer for just general like office work. So I have the websites that I always go to, or like my CRM, my calendar, my to-do list, whatever, is on a button. So whatever app I'm in, I can just hit a button and it opens Chrome with that website there.
Cool.
There's a button to open all the apps that I frequently use. So if I want to open ScreenFlow, there's a button for that. If I want to do a screen capture, there's a button with an actual macro, a command that not only opens ScreenFlow but starts a recording. So when I think, oh, that is cool, I want to do a screen cap of that, I just hit a button and it starts.
Right.
And so you can configure it to whatever you want, and it's such a great workflow boost. And I'm just starting now using it, and I need to configure a lot more. But it's already so much fun. It's super
awesome.
Cool.
I'm going to check that out because I have an iPad, so I think that would be fun.
Yeah.
All right. My next one is recording sample audio to reference. So this is for things like your drum tuning. If you set up the kit and sounded awesome, quickly record each of those drums so that you can later in the day make sure your drums still sound like that and compare if they still sound awesome and fresh like those drums did earlier. And you can do this with strings as well. That's how you know if your strings are getting too dead. Just like get the bassist to hit each of his strings open or whatever a couple times, and then you can go back. Or, you can also just go back to the beginning of the song, like assuming that you recorded in order of the chronologically of the song. You could just go listen to the intro DI, and then wherever you are at like the bridge, and listen to that DI. And if it's obviously sounding different, then right?
Yeah.
But there's something to be said for like a control. So maybe have him replay the intro and then compare those two, because like a different part is going to sound different. But you just want to be able to see, okay, are we going crazy, or does this actually sound like crap all of a sudden? What's going on?
Absolutely. It's super invaluable. Your ears will get tired throughout the session. You're not going to be able to tell after a while, and like having that reference is crazy important.
You know what? Honestly, you could do that with vocals too. Probably wise.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. On Saturday, on that vocal session that I mentioned, we had a situation where I thought that the take sounded pretty cool, and I was not so familiar with that vocalist yet, and I thought everything sounded great. And then one of the guys said, hey, I think in the demo his voice sounded way better. And I didn't know, because I thought it still sounded great. And then we went through the session that day, and we noticed already that there was like that the voice kind of got worse. And then we listened to the demo that was done on a completely different day with like a really fresh voice, and it was a totally different voice. So if I hadn't had that reference, I would just I would say, okay, I would have a proof that take, because I wouldn't have known that it could be much better.
Ah, interesting. Okay, I'm going to budge in line because it's relevant. But I have a tactic where I pretend to be busy so that the vocalist has to warm up. I'm like, go in there, warm up, and I just got to do some stuff, and I'll be, as soon as I'm ready, we can jump into it. And then 2 minutes later, they're like, okay, I'm good when you are. And I'm like, yeah, it's not enough warming up. So, I mean, I am doing stuff, there's always something to do. I'm editing the guitar or whatever, but they just think I'm getting their vocal chain set up. But that's quick. That takes no time. But I'm just keeping busy, and I want them to warm up for 15 minutes or something, And that's one way to get them to do it, because vocalists seem to hate warming up. So if I kind of just don't tell them to, but put them in the room with nothing else to do, it seems to work.
Yeah, exactly. Versus if you tell them to warm up, they'll say, "Oh, I'm fine. Let's just go."
Yeah, I'm already warm. Let's go. Like, no, you got to do something while I get ready. That's how I word it.
Yeah. Oh, that's a super cool one. That's a good one.
It's different for everyone, but like often another good one. If there's a piano and there's somebody in the band that plays piano, I'm like, hey, go lead a warm up session with the band, and then everybody does warm ups together with like somebody playing scales on piano, and that seems to go well.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's also a good one. Awesome. Cool. Then real quick. So one, I just threw that in there because it was also part of a session that I'm working on right now, where I haven't thought about that really in my checklist that I send bands and the way that I communicate with bands, but I will do from now on. And it's, I tell every band to label tracks a certain way, to organize things a certain way when they track, and to label tracks like not with the band members' names or anything, but like with the function of the track. So like rhythm, right, and lead, center, or whatever, so that I know when I open up the session what is what, and so stuff like that. But what I haven't mentioned up until now is that it's probably a good idea to make a new track if you change the guitar sound, for example. So what happened was the band sent me tracks. They were super cool, organized. They were labeled clearly, and everything was good. And I made a rough mix and started balancing. And like whenever a part changed or at some spots in the song, I was like, what's going on? Like the part before felt right, and now everything falls apart. What's happening? And then I needed to go search for the track that had changed. And it turned out that they recorded a rhythm guitar track, but they used different guitar tones on that one track. So what that leads to is you either need to cut the track into pieces and then move it to different tracks for different sounds, or you need to automate a bunch and make different EQ moves in every session. And it's just a tedious way to work. So it's much more efficient for yourself during tracking as well. If you have like one rhythm track that has the fuzzy guitar tone, and then you have one that has the high gain tone and one that has a crunch tone or whatever, so that you can just push a fader up for one sound, and you can make EQ moves and tweaks to that sound, and it will stay consistent through the track, versus having to like enable and disable EQs throughout the song.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. A good rule of thumb is if you have to use different plugins on the track for the sound you're trying to get, it should be on its own track, kind of thing. Yeah. But in the case of like a fuzz guitar tone, that might be happening with the amp. But if it's different, it should probably be on a different track. That's just good rule of thumb. As for naming it, I wanted to quickly touch on that. I've got a method that I think is foolproof and everybody in the world should adopt. It should be instrument, function, descriptive, pan. So for my system, I use a letter for instrument. So it's just D for drums, G for guitar, V for vocals. And then the function, so like you said, could be rhythm guitar, whatever you want, like that, what it's doing in the song. And then descriptive, and that's only if it needs it. And a lot of DIY people that send me tracks aren't recording amp sounds, so they need to tell me that it's meant to be dirty, like this is high gain. I'm like, oh, cool, that's great to have. And then the panning, where it's meant to live. And I like to abbreviate all of that. So it might be G, R, L. And that's enough for me. Literally, it's guitar, it's rhythm, it's left. Like, that's awesome. You can, more letters is fine too, but it's so awesome. And then when you're actually like a working engineer and you're trying to bust stuff around, and I click like to bust something like a track to another aux, it shows me all of the tracks in my session, but they're now grouped by alphabetically. So there's all my D tracks, all my G tracks, all my V tracks, and it's like so easy to see 100 things, but know exactly where I'm meant to be looking. Yeah,
100% agreed. Same here, basically.
Yeah. And I know some people use numbers as well, but that's only works with their system, so I'm not really into it.
Yeah. Just don't label them Thomas take 7 or something like that. That doesn't make any sense, and it's not relevant for us. So,
yeah, Thomas bonus whammy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like great.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And if you can tell what it is when you listen to it, that doesn't need to be in the name. Like whammy, for example. It's like, okay, it could just be called a lead. I think, it's obviously a whammy. We're mixing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Actually, that's worth mentioning. You're labeling things for the person who's going to be on the song after you, not for you.
Yeah. in a way, for you to move to like, if you don't label tracks at all, you should do it for yourself as well, because you don't want to search for audio 3, 4, 6 or whatever. But it's for the person that comes after you, and you do yourself a favor if you do it. So cool. And then there's 2 left here. One is if you don't have a DI track for whatever reason, and you still want to edit a guitar track or make some or comp it or whatever. There's the danger, and even with a DI track, there's a danger here, because if you're editing guitars and you cut at a transient, so where the pick hits the strings, without a DI track, it's very hard to tell where that even is. If it's a distorted guitar. And with a DI track, you might see the transient, but the actual pick attack is quite a bit before that, because the high spike that you see is already the note that's coming out of the guitar. And before that, there's the scratch, the pick attack, the start of it. It's visually, it's a little before the big transient. And a good way to see where that actual pick attack is, so you don't accidentally cut into it, is to take the distorted guitar track, put a high pass filter, a low cut on it, to like 1K or so really high up, and then consolidate that. So make a copy of it, consolidate that, and then look at that, because the low end will be gone, and the first thing you see clear transients, and the first thing you'll see, it will be a little before the transient on the DI track actually, and that's the scratch, the pick attack where the pick hits the string. And you're gonna see that better in the M track actually than you're gonna see it in the DI track. So high pass the track, make a copy, high pass it, consolidate it, and then look at where the pick attack is a neat little trick to not mess up the transients of your guitar.
Do you do that every time?
No, not every time, because I kind of know how much space I need to leave before, like when I look at the DI, so I don't do it. It's just a neat little workflow thing before you drive yourself crazy editing guitars and you end up cutting into transients and you're not really finding where the attack is. So if you don't have a DI especially, and if you want to consolidate, if you want to comp a guitar or edit it, then it can be really hard and really tedious to do that. And so that's a way to solve that and to get into a better workflow.
Definitely. Yeah. I only have ever done that when it's like uber technical, needs to be beyond precise. And I want to visually check that my ears are correct. That's the kind of time. But it's definitely a good thing to do. And I think worth mentioning that our ears as humans perceive that pick scrape that you would have been missing as the beat. Like that's what we're timing is based off for us. So you can't really look at the waveform as if you're in time. It's what our ears are hearing.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's what people will do a lot of times. They will quantize it so that the big peak is on the grid, and that will lead to the guitar being early.
Yeah.
Because the timing is a little like the attack is before that.
Exactly.
And with that trick, you can actually see that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. And then the last one here on my list is the one that I enjoyed recently. You don't have to do that. Sometimes less is more, but I really enjoyed lately. And that is, if I'm recording, especially for drums, like kick, snares, and guitars, I would say I do that a lot. So the technique is to combine 2 rather extreme sounding mics to get the full picture of what you're recording compared to trying to get everything out of one mic. So for example, I had a snare drum last week where I put a dynamic mic on it, and it was good, but it was lacking something. So what I ended up doing was I used a specific dynamic mic that has a lot of aggressive mid-range to it, but lacks a bit of like bottom fullness and also a little like top end precision transient, but it has a really nice ring and aggression in the mid-range on that snare drum. So I used that, and next to it, with the capsules aligned, I put a condenser mic that captured the lows and the highs and has a rather boring sounding mid-range. So I have that dynamic for the aggression and the mid-range and the crack, and then the condenser for the body and the actual wires and the stick attack.
Right.
And those 2 combined gave me a way better picture of the overall snare than either one of them.
Cool.
So
yeah,
that's one thing. And with guitars, same thing. I have one pretty harsh sounding, aggressive dynamic mic set close to the center of the speaker in a really aggressive spot, and that alone would be piercing and not enjoyable. And then I have a ribbon mic, and it's called the VR1 Voodoo by SE Electronics.
Okay, I was like a voodoo mic. Oh,
yeah, it's called VR. Yeah, it's called VR1 Voodoo. It's great. It's a great ribbon mic, but it's pretty dark sounding, as some ribbon mics are. and he has a lot of proximity effect, and so it gets even more like dark and full if you have it close to the cap. And I have that to the side of the speaker more, and then making that characteristic even more extreme that way. And what happens is I have two faders with completely different sounding things on it. One is the bright aggressive stuff, and one is the full body round smooth stuff. And because they're so different, you have less phase issues because they are barely related. It's like two different signals almost. And you don't, I need almost no EQ aside from some notches that you need to do maybe on guitars, but it's like a tilt EQ. Like if you move the faders, it's like you can EQ the guitar by just moving those two faders. And those extremes on two faders gave me better control and a better overall picture of the guitar again than just one mic in that particular situation. So it's not always the thing to do, and sometimes the 57 is all you need, but it's worth trying. And what I really like about this is the idea of making extreme things and combining them versus like I like that more than doing the opposite where people would put a bright mic in a dark spot and then a dark mic in a bright spot and both end up sounding pretty much the same.
Right.
So I like to do the opposite. I like to make them even more extreme so that there are less phase issues on a guitar, for example, and that every mic can do what it does best, basically.
Right. I like that idea. That's cool.
So that's one thing where I just, instead of, I would have to start with that snare drum, I would have needed a lot of tweaking would have been necessary to get it to where I would have wanted it to be. And those two mics just did it instantly. So
cool. All right. That's a heck of an episode. There's a lot in there. I really hope that you did have a notepad out because that was necessary.
Yeah, exactly.
Might warrant a re-listen.
Yeah, that was a good one. I enjoyed that as well. So
Me too. I learned a lot. Sweet.
This was action-packed, man. All right, let's wrap it up then, and see you next week.
Yeah, absolutely. If you haven't already, come hang out with us in the Facebook group, and because it's fun times in there. There's some really smart people in there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Go to theselfrecordingband.com/community. It will take you to the Facebook group, or if you're on Facebook, just search for the Self-Recording Band community and join us there. And yeah, can't wait to see you. And yeah, you have had your notepads out, but all of what we've been talking about in this episode, or at least the most important things and links to stuff, will be in the show notes as well, which you'll find if you go to theselfrecordingband.com/50. Because this is episode number 50. Yay.
Yeah, right on.
Right on. See you next week. Thank you for listening.
See ya. Bye.